Hey y'all, what's up? It's your girl Amanda and we are back with another video. I am going to be sharing with you my favorite literary horror books, which are like honestly my favorite genre of horror. Like, I don't like super gory body horror. I like literary horror. Don't know why. It's not as scary, not as gory, and it's just my vibe. But anyways, without further ado, let's just get right on into the recommendations. To start off the video, we are going to talk about a very famous author that is well known for her spooky, scary books. This is Shirley Jackson. We have Always Lived in the Castle, as well as The Haunting of Hill House. These are some classic horror books, if I do say so myself. These are older books, like from, I would say, like the 1950s-ish era. Shirley Jackson was very popular, very famous for her time, and she was a wonderful author, honestly. Like, her stories are quite legendary, if I do say so myself, and these books are no exception. This is backwards. These books are no exception. These are maybe a little more like horror adjacent than like literary horror, but they still, in my opinion, are like not as gory, not as creepy. They're more like psychological horrors, which is what I tend to go for, and I really enjoyed them. They are creepy, spooky time. This one is about this family where the main character is accused of like killing some of her family or something like that, if I do remember correctly. And the town basically hates them because they're like so spooky and creepy and just like weird. So the main character is like really creepy, and like you don't know if you can believe her or not, and it's just like she lives in this house in this town where people like really despise her and her family, and you're just like, what is going on? Like, what is happening? I don't understand. And then it becomes clear what is happening at the end. The Haunting of Hill House is the book that the TV show, like the Netflix TV show, is based on. So like that's kind of, if you've seen that, you kind of know what happens here. But the original story is this man, this psychologist, I believe, invites these participants to come to this house, this like apparently haunted house, and he asks them to come stay in the house with him while he conducts his like experiments. Sorry, there's something in my eye. I believe part of it is that people who have stayed there before previously have like died in the house after like a certain amount of time of staying in there. So he's like trying to conduct an experiment of like where this like weird phenomena is and like what exactly it is and just all that stuff. So it's a very creepy, spooky time. I highly recommend Shirley Jackson. Next, we have a book that I read like last month. My dog is stretching, if you could hear that groan. Anyways, I have Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter. And this book is so good in my opinion. Like, I love this book. It's about this woman who works, she's like in her 20s. She lives in San Francisco, I believe, and she works for like some corporation, like whatever, like big company, this big tech company. And she is kind of like miserable in her life, and then she also has this like black hole that follows her around, like throughout her whole life. It has followed her around, and so it's kind of like psychologically like, girl, what is going on? What is this black hole? And also like, what are you doing? And it's kind of like existential, and I loved it. It was like really melancholy. I don't know if I'm selling this to you, but like it was really melancholy and like very much so about like her descent into like, I don't want to say madness, but like her descent into like depression and stuff like that, and like into like a worse state than what she started out in the book. And it's just like, girl, what are you doing? Like, come on, girl. But I loved it. Those are like my kind of books, like following a 20-something-year-old who's like miserable. Like, that's like my favorite kind of book. The next book I have is yet another book following like a 20-something-year-old. And I say 20-something-year-old because this is about a vampire. So it's like, is she really 20? Like, she's a vampire. But anyways, this is Woman Eating by Claire Coda. Let me set the scene. This woman has just put her mom, her vampire mother, into a nursing home because she has dementia. And so it's getting harder and harder to take care of her because she is like losing it mentally. So she puts her mother into this nursing home. That's the very beginning of the book. And she moves into this like studio where she's not supposed to be living in this studio because it's supposed to be like an art studio for like artists to create their craft. But she like moves in because she's like, I have nowhere else to go. And then it's just about her being like a 20-something-year-old, but like a vampire. And just her experience trying to navigate the world. Like, that's the best way I can put it. And it's fascinating. I loved it so much. It was so like surreal. It was so good. I love this. I cannot recommend this enough. I know some of these books might not seem like horror, like literary horror. Like, these are very much so literary, emphasis on the literary with like a sprinkling of horror. So this next one is a little more horrific than the others. This is Notes on an Execution by Dania Kukowka. And this is basically about a prisoner who was like a serial killer. And you're following different perspectives. You're following first person perspective of the serial killer because he's on death row and he's about to be like killed basically in prison. So it's just like following him leading up to the day of his death sentence, as well as it follows 3 women in his life that were like most influential in his life that like are still alive. And it follows their perspectives as well. And it was so interesting because it was like, what is happening? Like, I know he's about to die, but also like, what? It was really good, okay? It was very, very good. I really love this book. Next is The Push by Ashley Audrain. I know this one was really, really super popular when it first came out, and like it still kind of is. But it's basically about this woman who, she gets pregnant and she is like so excited, like, oh my gosh, like with her husband, you know, they're like, oh my gosh, a baby, like so exciting. And then she gives birth to this baby and then she has like 0 connection to this baby whatsoever. And she's just like, what is happening? And it's like postpartum depression. That's what you think at first. And then she's like, no, actually my child is like the worst. And then she starts like hating her child because she gives birth to a second child, and her second child she has like the strongest emotional connection to, and her first child is just like she hates. And you're just like, what is happening? And then her child, the second one, dies, and you're just like, what is happening? Like, what? And it's basically just about this mother. At some point throughout the story, she gets divorced from her husband because her husband is like, you're saying that our child is like a demon child. Like, who are you? Why are you blaming the child? She's literally a child. So he thinks she's like crazy, and all this stuff happens. She goes to like a book club or something like that. I forget if it's a book club or just like a meeting where she meets like her husband's new wife. And so she gets entangled in like that world, and it's all complicated. It sounds very complicated, but it's really not. It's just so interesting to see this woman's actions and like her grief and all this, like her postpartum depression and all these factors. It's so good. Yeah, it's really good. Next is the book Reprieve by James Hahn Matson. This book I feel like was very hit or miss for people last year, and understand why, but I loved it, so whatever. Basically, you're following these 4 perspectives of like 4 people who go into this haunted house type attraction, but it's like the kind that like you can be touched by the actors. So it's like a full blown experience, right? And then one of the 4 people dies, and then the whole book is you trying to retrace your steps and figure out like who died and also like how they died, who killed them, and all this stuff. It's really good. It's so good. But it was really pushed as like a horror book when it came out, but it's more literary horror. I still think it's like horrific because it's kind of gory. But other than that, it's not super like spooky, eerie, like whatever. But I had a fun time with it. Another book that I don't have with me is Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. This is a book about, so how do I explain this? This couple, this gay couple, end up dying in a hate crime, and each person in the couple, their fathers, I guess, come together and basically try and track down who like killed them. Like out of their grief, they're like, we are going to find the freaking people who killed our sons, and we are going to like get vengeance basically. And it's like them trying to deal through their grief as well as deal with like their homophobia. It's really good, and it's like suspenseful. It's like more of a literary thriller than like a literary horror, but like I had to add it into this list. Another one I do not have with me is Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valente. This one is about basically this woman wakes, on like the first page, she like wakes up and she's like, I am my husband's perfect wife. Like I am made for him and all this stuff. And then you kind of realize the truth is all I'm going to say. It's a novella, so that's why I'm not really saying much. But you realize the truth of the situation by the end of the book, and you're just like, what? So yeah. Next, I have Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. This one is more of like a literary thriller, but I really love this. It is following this main character who wants to make it big in like the music industry, and then one of these like big music people, like I don't know if he's a producer or like just a singer, but like he decides to bring her onto his label. But then he promises her like, oh yeah, I'll make you a star. But then he kind of just like abuses her and ends up like harming her more so than helping her. And then you find out that like in the very beginning of the book that like he's dead, like somebody killed him, and you're trying to figure out throughout the whole book like who did it and like what exactly led to this event. It's really good, really scary. Scary as in like this could happen to you. It's like more of like a real life scenario. But yeah, it's impeccable. We are on to our last 2 books. This is Joyland by Stephen King. This is one of his older books, I believe, and it's basically about this main character who decides to work a summer at a carnival, but the carnival is kind of like haunted, and it's him like trying to figure out how the carnival is haunted, because like people died at the carnival and they just kind of like carried on like nothing happened. So he's trying to figure out like who the murderer is, as well as like, is it really haunted? But then also he has this relationship with like a boy in a wheelchair and his mom, and you're just like, what is happening? It's really good, but it's just like, this is spooky. But also, why is this boy in a wheelchair here? And lastly, we have The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. This is about, how do I even describe this? This is about 4 friends who previously, like I think it's like 10 years before the timing of this book. 3 years, did I say 3 years or 10 years? I'm not sure. I'm not sure the timeline, but like years prior to the beginning of this book, this group of 4 friends who live on an Indian reservation end up going out to hunt for elk, right? But they accidentally, not accidentally, more like purposefully, go into this territory that they're not allowed to go into because it's like reserved for the elderly in the reservation. So they cross this like invisible line and like kill this mother elk that is like pregnant with like a baby elk or something like that. And then something starts killing each of these men off one by one. And that's the gist of it. It's really creepy and you're just like, what is this entity that is hunting them down? What is happening? You are getting flashbacks to the event that kind of spurred this. And you're just like, what is happening? All right, y'all, here are some of my favorite literary horror books. I hope you enjoyed. Comment down below if you've read any of these and if you agree with me that they're good. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment down below for any videos that you want to see from me. I am so open to like any recommendation videos or like vlogs or like TBR videos, like whatever you guys want. And don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. And all my socials are going to be listed down below in the description. So without further ado, I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye.